Amazing. Welcome, everybody. Hello, hello. Great. Welcome. Everyone's joining in. Amazing. We'd love to have you on video if possible for this one. We'd love being able to see you. Also, if you don't want to have video on, it's totally fine. Hey, everyone. Welcome. Just as we gather, if everyone can pop in the chat where you are in the world and what you do creatively. Right, where you are in the world and what you do creatively. If you can pop that into the chat just as we get underway. We've got a few more people joining us in as well. Welcome, welcome. Lots of familiar faces here and also lots of unfamiliar faces. I absolutely love that. Amazing. So yeah, popping in the chat where you are in the world and what you do creatively. Now, I will say straight away, I'm actually a New Zealander. If you don't know me yet, that's where the funny accent is actually from. But I spend most of my time in the Americas and Europe. I'm actually in Costa Rica for about 6 weeks at the moment, which is fantastic. So loving seeing where everyone is based. We've got Austin, San Diego, New York, Massachusetts. I love it. Near Boston, UK. Hey, Kim, amazing. Michigan, Wichita, Palm Springs, amazing. I love it. We've got people from all over, which is fantastic. Hey, Chris, Hamilton, New Zealand. There we go. I love it. Paris, amazing. Sydney, Sarah from Sydney. Hey, Sarah, amazing. Spain, look at this. This is so cool seeing where everyone is tuning in from. So that also means that everyone is in different time zones. So it is the morning for some people here, afternoon for others, and evening for others as well. Might even be the middle of the night for a few people based on some calculations there. I think it's a pretty early one for you too, Chris, from New Zealand there. Amazing. Fantastic. We're going to get underway. We've got an amazing webinar planned for today. So I'm going to hand over to Sydney so that she can introduce herself and then me, and then we're going to kick into our training for today. Over to you, Sydney.
Hey, I'm Sydney. I'm an illustrator and muralist from Tampa, Florida. And I like to do lots of work that includes like things from nature and lots of colorful, high contrast work. And I've been working with Logan for about a year now. I started with the first 3-month program about a year ago, and then I've been staying on ever since.
Amazing. I love it. So good. And honestly, just great to be here and be connecting with everyone here. And I know there's a lot of people that have joined who know Sydney, but not me. And there's some people that know me, but not Sydney. And there's some of you that know both of us, which is fantastic. So we're going to be really diving into the training for today. So thank you, Sydney, for having me along for your audience as well. It's so great to run another webinar together. So look, what we're going to do to start off with, I'm going to do a bit of an intro and then we're just going to be diving in. So those of you that don't know me, Logan Elliott from New Zealand originally. My background is that I had my own creative business for 11 years. It was in the live event space in New Zealand. And in the early years of doing that, I also did my own, studied a business master's, a master's in entrepreneurship in New Zealand. So that was something that I focused on. And eventually that kind of evolved into me doing more and more teaching work. So over the years, part-time, whilst I was running my creative business, I was teaching with universities and public programs part-time, primarily in New Zealand, right up to a master's level as well, multiple universities, also lots of other different speaking and working with people one-on-one in groups, online, offline, from on stage, all sorts of things as well, lots of different talks. And that basically continued to evolve over the years. And then eventually I started doing my own coaching and mentoring programs in around 2015, when I really started getting more people who were approaching me being like, hey, I don't necessarily need to go to university, but I do need help with the business side of my creative business. So fast forward to now, eventually I then sold the creative company and these days am focused on helping awesome visual creatives like yourselves to grow their business. And that is under the brand Flammable Entrepreneur. So, it's kind of a fun brand and it's related to my previous business, but also related to the fact that I also run retreats on volcanoes occasionally as well. So that's another thing that I do sometimes spend time on, is running retreats. These days, the coaching really encompasses basically 3 groups of people that I'll briefly mention. First of all, everyone's visual creative that we work with, so very much in that space. So graphic designers, illustrators, and muralists, and other areas of visual creative as well. And the people are broken into 3 groups. So group 1 are like, hey, I'm kind of doing this on the side. I've maybe got a full-time job or a part-time job, and I would love to really make this work full-time. Right, so that's basically group 1. And we really help them to, yes, grow their business, really get things moving and ideally exit that day job. So that's stage to group one. Group two are like, hey, I'm already doing this mostly full time, but it's not sustainable. I really need to make this work to really keep it working long term. So that's where we help those people to grow their business. Group three are basically people who have 10,000 followers on Instagram or more. And about 10% of people we work with have those larger followings. So, most people we work with have smaller followings, below that 10,000, many well below that 10,000. But we work with a small number of people who have those larger followings as well. So that's a bit of a brief overview about myself and my background. We're going to be diving right into a whole training around marketing and more specifically around how to land your dream clients. Just before we do that, something you might have seen on the emails or messages when you signed up to this is that we are doing a bit of a giveaway, 3 freebie coaching calls. They will be with me for 30 minutes. And if that's something that interests you, would love to get on a call. Basically, I'm going to drop a survey that we'd love you to do to fill in for that. So if that's interesting for you, I've dropped that in the chat. We'll be including it in the notes afterwards as well. But pop that open now. You fill that in, and honestly, it takes 5 to 10 minutes. And everyone that does it says they get something really interesting from just doing the survey, whether or not they end up on a call with myself. We'll also be giving away some extra calls to Paul from my team. He's our business specialist on the team as well. So we'll be giving away some extra calls to him as well. So I hope to connect with a whole bunch of you through that. So I've just dropped that link there in the chat. Awesome. We're going to get underway. So honestly, I'm just excited about the subject because it's a big pain point for many people we work with, which is how to find your dream clients, right? That's kind of what we need, right? To grow a business, to grow your creative business, you want to have those dream clients, the clients that are really going to pay you what you're worth, value what you do, and help you to actually grow your business. So we're going to dive into some subjects around this. Now, feel free to keep the chat alive. We love seeing stuff in the chat. We are going to have some question time at the end, but you're welcome to just fire things into the chat as we go, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what you're noticing. And then, of course, we have time for questions at the end as well. Amazing. So the first thing we're going to focus on here is really around marketing in your business and what to focus on. Now, one of the things that we see, and this often happens when we start working with people, is that there's a mindset that you have to be everywhere. Right, you see it online, like people are talking about, you've got to be everywhere to be seen. And, I really don't agree with that because it's really hard to be everywhere. That's super overwhelming. There's not enough time in the day to be everywhere. I think often that advice comes from people who have like big teams, right? A team of people who are doing lots of the marketing elements of their business, and they can maybe be lots of places. Actually, most people we work with are solo business owners. They're earlier stage, they're wanting to grow, but they don't necessarily want to build a big, huge team. Now, occasionally we have clients that do end up with 1 or 2 team members, but most of our clients are working on their business themselves. So therefore, it's really about focus when it comes to marketing. You do not have to be everywhere. It is really important that you actually focus your energy. And a good way to think about this is what we call the 80-20 rule, which is that you really should be focusing your energy on one area of marketing for at least 80% of that time you spend on marketing. Focus is so powerful. You do not need to be everywhere. But when you are figuring out what that is, you do kind of need to be all in on whatever you figure out. Now, I'm just going to go over a few different areas we tend to see for visual creatives. One of them, pretty straightforward, it's social media, and typically it's Instagram. So that can be what we call a core marketing strategy. And if that's your thing, if you're like, that's my place, I'm all about Instagram, the thing is, that's where you're going to spend 80% of your marketing is on the Instagram platform in lots of different ways. So it does mean that you need to be posting there pretty regularly. That means 1 post per day. That means you also need to be up with what's happening with this changing algorithm, which is changing all the time. It means that you need to use the different features and tools on Instagram. Anything from getting into the DMs, obviously, into things like Reels, and even exploring other areas of Instagram that you could be doing through collaborations and different projects within Instagram. So, it's a really good thing to think about is focus is important. And often what we see is that people dilute themselves across not only multiple platforms on social media, but they'll also be trying to do a bunch of other things as well. And they'll be trying to explore some ad stuff and trying to do outreach and trying to do networking, and they just get completely overwhelmed. So what we're saying is that, no, you want to focus 80% of that energy on one area. Now, it may not be Instagram. right? We have clients that it is Instagram, but we also have clients that it's other things as well. So typically we see things like outreach is another area that can be a big core focus. It could be connections and networking. It could be partnerships. That's another big area as well. And then, as I mentioned, social media. And it doesn't have to be Instagram. It could be another specific platform. We've worked with people who have had other areas of social media that have really worked for them quite well as well, whether that's Pinterest, occasionally LinkedIn, even honestly, we've seen other platforms as well. It's been kind of interesting, even a TikTok person there too. So the idea here is that you do need something to help get you out there to more people. Right? This is the biggest problem when it comes to most businesses, is that not enough of the right people actually know that you exist. Right? That's a big, huge thing that we tend to see. So therefore, you do need to get out there, as they say, but you need to get out there in a focused way. Now, yes, you can spend 20% of your energy on other things. Right, that's totally fine. I'm talking about 20% of your marketing energy, not 20% of your total energy. I'm sure you've got lots of other things you need to balance within your business and life as well. One note I will say just around this is that sometimes people say to us, my core strategy is repeat clients and referrals, right? And kind of makes sense. It's like that's a marketing strategy. And I'm like, yes, but. So yes, repeats and referrals are a great way to sustain and grow a business. Often what happens though early on is that you don't have lots of clients to be repeats. You also don't have lots of people to refer you. And even as you get further into business, it's still going to be a smaller number of your new opportunities that come in. You do need to find new opportunities. And we see people who are running a business and sustaining a business through referrals and repeats. They're not normally growing a business so much though. And most people we work with are really wanting to grow their business. So therefore, yes, those things are absolutely important, but it also comes down to getting you out there to more new people as well. So that's the core thing I'm going to cover over that. We'd love to hear your thoughts around this, Sydney, in terms of your own experiences and what's really worked for you and your perceptions on this as well.
Definitely. Yeah, coming into the program, I I feel like I had just a general idea of like, okay, send some outreach. That was basically it. But honing in on what's working, what isn't working, and then focusing your energy on what is working, I think is really a huge turning point, because then it's just like, okay, well, I'm not going to waste my time with, personally, I don't really waste my time with LinkedIn or like a whole lot of Pinterest, but I do a lot of cold emails and Instagram. Those two are my like top two. So being able to focus my energy and spend more time on what's working is really helpful.
I love it. It's so powerful. And, it's that focus. And something to note there, I think, for everyone here is that it can change over time as well, right? So you may find that your focus is on X to really get things going. You might be focused on something for the first year. And then that might shift and change. And I know even for Sydney, for you, like that has shifted as well, right? Your following has grown a huge amount on Instagram over the last 12 months. So more focus has gone even into Instagram as well, which is fantastic too. So I love that. What we're going to talk about next, everyone, is this idea around what we call supporting strategies. So the idea with supporting strategies is things that support your core marketing strategy. So what I'm saying here is, let's say your core marketing approach is Instagram or outreach. Well, what are the other things that you can do to support that core strategy? So I'm going to go into some of them. The number one I will mention is that having basic social media profiles set up elsewhere is actually a really good idea. So I'm not saying be everywhere. I'm not saying be on all the platforms. I'm saying at least have a profile set up on a bunch of different platforms. That actually often will save you a username, but also that could be a place that people will still find you. And sometimes what you can do is automate things to post there. So for example, if you are posting on Instagram, you can actually automate for that to be posting on Facebook as well, right? So that's something that you don't need to really spend extra energy on, but actually it can be really good because you can appear in other places too. But you might not be going on on Facebook much at all, but you can absolutely still have a profile, have a basic setup there as well. So that's one area. And I'm talking about other platforms as well. You could, even with LinkedIn, for example, even if you are not going to use LinkedIn as a real core marketing strategy, at least have a basic up-to-date profile set up there. Maybe you could post there once a month or a couple of times a year. that is a basic setup where people might surf around and just see, is this person real? Can I trust them? Well, if you've got some basic other profile setup, that can actually help. I love what Chris has shared here in the chat as well. And make sure you update the profile on those platforms. It's totally true, right? So what can actually sometimes happen is, we're putting our face out there as a professional business owner, creative business owner, and then people are going to do some research. That can actually happen. And what can happen? They might find an old Facebook profile or maybe a TikTok profile you set up years ago, and it's not really related to your business. And there's like a terrible, fuzzy old photo of you, right? And that can actually help or lower our credibility and trust with our potential clients. So I love that extra mention there as well. Another thing that we will talk about, obviously, is Instagram itself. Yes, we've got plenty of clients that are like, well, I don't think Instagram is like my core area, so I don't really want to focus on that. And we're like, great. At least you need to have an up-to-date profile set up, and you probably want to post there occasionally, right? If you're doing outreach, for example, if you're doing email outreach as one of your core approaches, well, people might still go to your Instagram. And if you haven't posted there for 6 months and it's out of date, they might be like, should I even reply to this email? Whereas if you just post there occasionally, that can help build that trust as well. Another thing I'll mention around supporting strategies is email lists are still alive and well. Right? That's a really, really important thing. Having an email list is so important. All of these social platforms you do not own your following. So it's part of a risk. It can absolutely happen where you can lose access to your social media profile. We've had it happen to people that we've worked with as well. And we've had to help them rebuild it because it can actually happen where you actually lose your access. So this is where things like email lists and actually building your own email list is really, really important. Ideally, you do send out a message to your list about once a month, but a starting point is at least start collecting those email addresses. So that could be a sign up via your website. You could get into what we call lead magnets, which is like a downloadable freebie. I'm sure you've all seen them as well, a freebie that you get in return for signing up to someone's email list. And this supports your core strategy as well. So for example, outreach, we're going to talk a little bit more about as well. But if you have outreach, if people say, hey, I'm interested in working with you in the future, when you contact them, you can then go back to them and say, hey, fantastic, would you like to sign up to my email list in the meantime? So that's a really nice way to keep in touch with them as well. And that's a supporting strategy. You don't need to necessarily send an email every single week or multiple times a week to have that a strategy that can really support your core thing. One more I will mention here that people, I think, often underutilize is that direct messaging within social media platforms, specifically within Instagram, right? There's a whole world of that there, and you can actually be creating those personal conversations with people, and that can build a lot of trust there rather than just the big emails or the mass email list. There's other ways you can build those connections. Can be a bit more time consuming because you're talking to one person at a time, but this is where growing a business is about building and connecting with people and growing those relationships as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts around these supporting strategies and your perspectives on this stuff as well, Sid.
Yeah, the thing you just mentioned about having, when you do your outreach and then you get an email back like, oh yeah, we'll keep you in mind for later. That just happened to me this week, and I did the strategy where it's like, okay, would you like to sign up for my email list in the meantime? And, they were totally happy to do so. So that I know that next time I send an email in that category of outreach for that email list, they're going to get it and be reminded of me. And I don't have to think about every individual person that I've been like, oh, I'll save you for later. So that's really helpful to think about.
I love it. It's so powerful. And I think for everyone here, like, this is active stuff that people are using, right? So this is stuff that, so good to see Sydney is doing these things, and they are working as well. Like sometimes, when you hear business tips and strategies and advice, it's like, is this going to work for me? Like these are things that are working for our visual creative clients specifically these days, right? Which is fantastic. Hey, what we're going to do, we can do a quick pause because I would love everyone to drop their Instagram link. Really, really important that you do put your URL link in the chat. This is a great way to connect with everyone here. I would love to be following all of you. I know Sydney as well. So drop your link. Don't put the @ tag, drop a link like I just did. This is also a really good way to connect with everyone here as well. So drop those links. That means that everyone else can go through, click, and follow each other. This is a great way to build community. We know that community is a huge part of business as well. And this is a great way to connect with some new people today, as well as learn a few new things as well. So I love that everyone's dropping their links in. And it's a good tip, always make sure it's your URL. Drop in there, because then people can just click it. Some people are on their phones. It's much easier to do it that way rather than trying to copy and paste if it's just the @ tag. So love it. Awesome. We're going to keep running through this, this webinar here, and we're going to talk more about outreach next. So outreach is something that you can do, and I'm specifically talking about email outreach, right? Sending emails. And I think when people hear this, if they haven't done that, they're like, oh, you mean like spam, Logan? Like there's spam emails that I occasionally get in my inbox? And I'm like, no, this is targeted emails that are to people that are potentially interested. Right, so I think we all think about those spam emails. We get kind of annoyed marking things as spam. This is about very targeted emails to your potential client audience. So it's a very, very important part of it to really think about. We're not going to dig around other areas of outreach, but you can be thinking about other forms of outreach like DM, right? Sending direct messages through Instagram. There's a form of outreach that you can do. And we talk about two different types of outreach. One of them is called cold outreach, one's called warm outreach. Basically, cold outreach is to someone that has never heard of you before, right? There's no link, there's no connection. And then you've got more of your warm outreach, which is that there's some form of connection. It could be there's an introduction that's been made, or they've heard of you before. There's some form of connection there. So it's warm outreach. They're gonna basically be more interested potentially. And the biggest thing that we're going to share in this part here is that outreach is a numbers game. Right? It comes down to you sending enough good emails to enough of the right people. So the biggest thing that we see when it comes to outreach is that people don't stick in for long enough. They kind of go, hey, I tried outreach, it didn't work, and they gave up. And we're like, okay, cool. Like, let's have a look at that. How many emails did you send? And they're like, I sent like 20 emails. And we're like, okay, like it's a good amount of emails, but we need to keep sending more. So it is a bit of a numbers game. What we see typically is that for cold outreach, a 10% reply rate is actually good. 10%, right? So if you send 20 emails, you might only get 2 replies. And then I'm saying that's good. Now, we've definitely seen much higher numbers than that, right? We've got clients that are getting 20, 30, even 40% reply rates, which is fantastic. And by the way, I'm saying reply rate, I'm not saying that they're booking and working with you. I'm just saying that they actually took the time to reply, because that's an indication that you're doing something right. So 10% is a good reply rate. Well, you've got to send more emails. So this is where it does come to getting into those consistent habit of sending the emails if this is something you're going to focus on. And it works, right? This is the thing I will say. I know it sounds like, oh, you have seen like, you're saying I need to send like 100 emails. Like, one of the things I love about outreach is that this allows you to actually control your marketing. You can actually take an action and get results. So the numbers are all over the place in terms of whether you will get bookings and what that takes. We had a client a few months ago who did outreach for the first time. They sent 20 emails. One of those people replied, and it ended up being a $4,000 project, right? And I was like, amazing. Just so you know, it's probably not going to happen when you send another 20. We want to keep you consistently taking action, but we were celebrating that win. So being out there is important, but it's going to come down to numbers. So what do you do though? You don't start with 100, you don't even start with 20, you start with 1 email. Because I think for most people, that's pretty overwhelming to think, okay, you're saying if I send 100 emails, I might get 10 replies. Oh my goodness, that's going to take forever. Well, yes, but we start with 1. We create a template, we personalize that template. We then build up our capacity. There's a whole skill set around even finding the right connections to email. There's a whole skill set around knowing who you actually want to be even working with and how to reach out to them as well. So that often actually can take a lot of time to do, is actually finding the contacts. The actual process of like sending an email, particularly if you've got a template, you do some personalization, right? Well, it's going to actually be time consuming to find the right contacts. So that's just something I really wanted to mention there around that too. But in the end, outreach does still work. It is something that is a good strategy. It just takes time, and it's a bit of a numbers game as well. And it's something that I know Sydney does a lot of. So I would love to hear your thoughts around that, Sydney, from your perspectives too.
Yeah. So I've tried like a whole bunch of different outreach strategies, like, cold emails or DMing in combination with cold emails. And then in frequency, I'm always thinking like, how many is enough? And I think what I've come to with that is starting small, like, right now, I'm actually just starting more from the drawing board and then working my way up again just to see what's working with my newest strategy. So right now I'm like, okay, I'll send 1 or 2 every morning. And then as that keeps going, maybe if I have the time, ramp it up a little bit, see what's working. And ultimately the amount that you need to send is just going to be kind of reciprocal to how many jobs you're getting based on your outreach.
Amazing. I love that. And, this stuff's important to see. It can get pretty technical, right? So we can see that. But part of what you are doing as an artist, as a creative that's running a business, is you're being a scientist as well. It's something that I don't talk about so much, but my first degree was actually in science, right? And people are like, wait, what? Where did that come from, Logan? My first degree was in science. So often I view creative business as being a scientist. And even what Sydney was describing right now is this is a process where she's testing stuff, she's trying things, she's seeing if this works, she's actually tracking what's going on as well. So, it's so important to really view these things as experimentation as well. Awesome. I know a few people are starting to pop questions into the chat, which is totally fine. Feel free to add them now or just hold them for later once we get into time to jump into questions as well. We did have a couple pre-submitted within that too that we'll jump into. Awesome. Okay. So next thing we're going to do is that we're going to be talking about something called research marketing. Just raise your hand if you've heard of research marketing before. If you've heard of that. So some people have, there's a few people here that have, a few people haven't. Fantastic. So research marketing is basically where you actually do research, you learn about what people need by creating a basic questionnaire. So you're learning about what potential people out there may need that you might be able to help with. The basic way is to create a survey, do that on Google Forms, and actually send it out through whatever you've got access to. It could be through your email list or through Instagram, or sending it privately to people one-on-one, sending it through your own networks, telling your friends, telling your family, getting them to send that link around as well. And what it basically is, it's about you learning about what people need, right? So that's the research part, where you're just learning about what people's needs are. So if you are a graphic designer, ask questions to understand what people's needs are when working with graphic designers. If you're a muralist, well, ask what people need when it comes to murals. What are the things that they have considered? What are the reasons they would book a muralist? What are the reasons they wouldn't? What are the things that they do and don't know? So it's really the research where you get to understand more about your audience, and that can help you to craft, yes, your offerings and how you offer and what you offer and what the components are, but it also actually connects you to your potential audience as well. And that's the marketing part. So research marketing. You can also include questions like, hey, are you potentially interested in joining my email list? Are you potentially interested in working together? Would any of these things be able to help you? So it's a way of really, in a light way, rather than that really direct marketing, you're actually basically saying, hey, I would love to learn more about what you need. And then, hey, I could potentially help you as well. And it's kind of a beautiful thing when you can go back to someone and say, hey, I learned about what you needed. I have this thing that can actually help exactly that. And sometimes you have developed that, then well, maybe you had it already and you just need to market it to them. So it's a really good way to help people understand their needs, but also potentially connect with you as a potential client as well. So, this is a pretty basic strategy. It's really about learning what people need and also opening the door for them to potentially work with you. As I said, I quite like it because it's a pretty light way to promote yourself as well. Well, what are your thoughts around this strategy and your ideas here, Sydney?
I was just over in the chat answering a couple
You're
of questions, so I'll pass on this one.
Totally, all good, all good. It's it's a powerful strategy when it comes to that research marketing, because it's really about you learning. And this is what I think people often get wrong in business, is that they say, hey, I've got these amazing creative skills, I can do all of these things. Yes, that's fantastic, but we've got to match them with what people need. And often it's not just about the skills, it's about how you deliver those skills. So for example, a lot of people that you work with would value professionalism, would value fast email responses. You can actually dig in and see what else they would value. We often think, oh, well, it's just about doing the designs or creating the artwork. No, it's often about the other parts of the process as well. And that's where, using things like research marketing, you can really dig into that as well. Amazing. I love it. We're going to dive into our next thing here. And we're going to really dive into this idea of pitch decks and proposals. And we're going to dig in a little bit more here. Now, we will have time for questions. So if you do want to post the question in the chat, now is the time, right? I know that a few people have fired them in already. So fire them all in there and we'll do our best to answer as many of them as we can as we dive into the question time within this here. So next thing we're going to dive into is what to include in your pitch deck. right? We're even adding to that. I'm going to include what to include in your pitch deck, but also get you thinking about the difference between a pitch deck and a proposal. First of all, it's semantics. I've heard plenty of people use these things in different ways. What is the difference between a portfolio, proposal, or pitch deck? Well, sometimes people are using these things interchangeably, but often they are actually different things. So I'm going to take you through a definition that myself and my team use, but just be aware that your own definition could be different, and this is something to think about. So if we're going to talk about a pitch deck versus a proposal, basically a pitch deck is more of a general, here is me and here's what I can do for you, right? It's more of an overview about yourself, your background, the sort of work that you're doing, sort of things that you offer. Usually it would include things like testimonials, case studies. So it's very, very general. And often you can see that much earlier on in the conversation process. You can actually include a pitch deck within, and people sometimes use the word portfolio. They'll include their portfolio. You can even include that quite early on when you're doing some cold emailing and those earlier things, when you're having conversations or someone shows some interest. You don't always have to do that, by the way. Plenty of times where you don't need to send a pitch deck. But I will say a proposal is a different thing. A proposal is what you send when you have learned about someone's needs. And this is a mistake we see tons of people doing, is that someone contacts you and says, hey, I'm interested in working with you. How much does it cost to do this? Right? How much does it cost to create a mural? And you respond with, here you go, here's my price list. Now, multiple things have gone wrong here. One of them is that you're trying to sell to this person too early. You don't know their needs. You don't really fully know what they need. Even though they said we need this, well, actually, you don't really understand fully what they need. You need to dig into that first. And people are terrible at mismatching what they want versus what they actually need. Right? They'll say, hey, we need this, but actually they need something else. So what you need to do is learn more about what their needs are. Ask questions. That can be getting on a call. It could be sending emails back and forth. And then eventually you send a proposal, and a proposal is more specific to them. Here's how I can help you based on our conversation. Here's the specific offerings that are relevant for you, rather than saying, hey, here's my price list and it contains a whole lot of things. Well, there's a whole lot of stuff in there that's not even relevant to them, and it's just noise. So it's really, really important that really balance those things there in terms of what you do in different places. So a proposal usually includes numbers and costs. What is it going to cost? Different connection offerings within that. So it's really important just to notice those differences within that. I don't generally recommend you include pricing in a pitch deck. Right? You could give a range. Here's a range of things to work with. Usually it's more useful to put a range or leave it out. But when you include it in a proposal, you're going to get a much more specific. Here's what it's going to cost to do the things you're potentially interested in. The other thing that you can do between these two things is you can ask more about their other needs. Right? So rather than just saying, hey, here's all my stuff, actually you might be able to help them in other ways and get more specific. You might say, hey, are you potentially interested in these sorts of designs as well? And they might say, yes, great, amazing. You can include that in your proposal. Don't just pitch stuff to people when they're not potentially interested in it. It's a really, really important thing to think about within that as we dive into this idea around pitch decks and proposals. Now, one big thing I will mention that you can include in both a pitch deck that you can do early on as well as proposals is you've got to mention you, right? You've got to build trust. One of the things we need to remember when we're messaging people a pitch deck or a proposal is that the person that you are speaking to isn't necessarily the only one reviewing the proposal. They could be sending it to their colleagues, to a team, to other people for sign off. So you need to build trust with those people as well. That's where including information about yourself in the proposal, even if that client already knows you, it's really important. So including that information. The other thing that you can really include is case studies, right? Examples of your work with other people, testimonials, reviews. We have to build trust. It's so important. So really leaning into that is such an important part of this, is actually you are your business. So we've got to really lean into you and why would they work with you? So building trust, more information about you. What is your background? What are those case studies? Who have you worked with? Examples of your work. Really, really important. And then reviews, testimonials. And of course, the types of things that you offer. And then you can personalize in terms of how you can specifically help them as well. Amazing. We are going to be jumping into the questions soon and sharing them. Do you have anything else you wanted to add there, Sydney, around pitch deck proposals, different things that you've learned or found yourself?
Yeah, I'd be happy to share my kind of outline of the pitch deck that I use when I'm cold emailing people who could be potential clients. So let me just share my screen here. Let's see, here we go. All right. So here's kind of a rough outline of what I would send to pitch to a potential mural client. So this is not a specific one. So this isn't after I've learned about their needs. This is just the first cold email. And I'll attach it with, you know, a little intro about me and, you know, what I can do for them and, you know, say, you know, check out the attached portfolio. And so you want to start with your logo and let's see. All right, and then you want to go into a brief intro, talk about who you are, what you do to help your clients, and why they should hire you. Next page would be a photo of you and a short resume. Again, talk about why you're qualified. You know, do you have a degree, awards? You know, who are your big clients? Just a little qualification. And then jump into some high quality photos of your work. If you have it, I would put in a case study here, talking about how you helped a previous client and put a relevant image there. This, you know, it's not totally necessary if you don't have this yet, but just make sure you get one in here ASAP. Do a project for your mom if you have to, and have, you know, work out how that would help her figure out a creative problem that she's got. Another page of high quality photos of your work. Another case study, if you have it, again, do a project for your cousin, do a project for mom, get some case studies in there. Some more high quality photos of your work, and then testimonials. Obviously, if you're just starting out, you're not going to have testimonials. Same thing again, it's really important to get these because when you think about, you know, when you're going to a restaurant, even something as simple as that, you're going to look at the reviews first. That's personally the first thing I'm looking at is like the reviews of the place before I even decide if it's something I'm interested in. So here's a little bit about how I get those. I'll send a review form after a project from Google Forms. And I'll just say, you know, thanks for working with me. Would you, you know, kindly take a moment to leave me a review? It really helps me and my small business. And then you get those in there and helps out a lot. And then just a thank you. I would also include a call to action here. So can they email you for a quote or can they subscribe to your newsletter? You want to continue that conversation so that this isn't just the last interaction that you guys have. And then after this email, just follow up 5 to 7 days later with another one. And we'll be sending this out to you guys so you guys can use this afterwards as well. And then one thing to note is, so this is for what I would use for murals. Obviously, a lot of you are probably going to be reaching out to art directors, and that would be a little bit of a different process. You're probably going to send, you know, just an email itself and then maybe attach your portfolio. You don't need to include all the rest of these like kind of qualifications in that in your presentation. And then sometimes keep in mind that every art director is a little bit different. They might have specific things for their company where you have a submission page. So make sure you look into that, because if you send them an email and actually they require a specific submission page, they're not going to check it out, basically. But yeah.
Amazing. I love it. Fantastic. What we're going to do now is we're going to dive into the questions. So we've already got a bunch of questions in the chat that we're going to work through as many of them as we can. So let's just start off here by, I know there was a mention there from Jessie around how to find contacts, and there's kind of two ways this can be taken. This is how to find contacts to basically email out, how to build an email list. That is actually kind of one side. It's how to do that. And that's where you need to dive into things like what we call those lead magnets, those freebie giveaway things. So a lead magnet is something that you offer in return for people signing up to your email list. One of the big things that we notice is that if you just have a sign up link on your website to sign up to subscribe, you're just going to get a small number of people signing up, right? And that's okay. You're just going to get a very small number. But if you have something that's a freebie downloadable that people can get when they sign up, it's just going to increase that a lot more. It's also going to give a place where you can actually promote your work as well. So this is where you can actually build those stronger connections through that as well. So the other side of this I'm going to get into is around, yes, building for your email list, but what about finding contacts for cold outreach? Right, this is a big thing that a lot of people struggle with is, okay, that's great, Logan, you just said I need to send like 100 messages to get 10 replies. Well, how do I find 100 contacts? The first thing is that you need to get very, very clear on who your target audience is, because often people are like, I don't know who to email. Well, we need to get clear on that. So getting specific about a target market is really important, and even in a specific location as well. So for example, if you are a muralist like Sydney, you could decide, hey, I want to work with cafes and restaurants in my region. Okay, well, that's more targeted now. You've now got okay, I can search for cafes. And as naff as this sounds, often you can just do some Googling to find these contacts. Sometimes there's lists out there, right? You can sometimes find lists online of maybe cafes in the local area. You can dig into those things. When you find those like lists that you can buy, these are like cold email outreach lists, just be very, very aware that lots of people are going to be contacting them as well. Right, so that's one thing that we need to just be very, very aware of if you're going to buy any of those lists. We generally say, well, it's not worth it. Occasionally you could test them out, but actually part of it here is actually making sure you're clear on your target market and who you actually need to be working with. The other thing you can do is you can dive into other areas of social media, right? So this is where you can find people through Instagram, through LinkedIn. That's another way to find contacts as well. We've even had clients that have literally used Google Maps, right? Like as in gone into Google Maps and typed in cafes or restaurants and then wired it out and gone through and opened them all up that way. Right? That's literally what you can do. So sometimes you need to get a bit creative around this as well. Amazing. So yeah, do you want to share around Rocket Reach, Sydney?
Oh, I'm raising my hand for the Google Maps thing. I've literally done that. I've gone and been like, okay, where do I want to like do murals at? And then I'll go in like the actual Google Maps and like walk through a town and be like, maybe there, and write it down and then look them up and email them. I've done that before. But yeah, you have to get creative sometimes about how you find your contacts and who you want to work with. But yeah, I just popped in the side chat here. You can use Rocket Reach for finding the specific emails once you have an idea of who you want to work with. So, let's say I have looked at my street on my Google Maps and I'm looking at the sign and I'm like, okay, Anthony's Pizza Place, and I can pop that into Rocket Reach and see if they have maybe an art director or a marketing coordinator that I could contact from the pizza place.
Love it. Very, very cool. We're going to jump into another question here. And this one's from Annie, which is it okay to use direct messaging, use DMs? And I think this is a great one because the short answer is yes, but it's more complicated than that, right? So yes, you can certainly contact people through direct messaging. And we're even talking about when we do this outreach, the cold DMs. Several things here to be aware of is that if you are doing DMs cold in Instagram, people are less likely to reply because they're less likely to see it. Right, so if someone's not following you first, then you can end up in their other inbox. So often it's actually more important to actually make sure they're following or they've engaged with you first. So this is where actually making sure you're following, maybe even connecting with them or liking some of their things so that they're aware and maybe they follow you back. When people follow you back, that's a great time to actually just start a small conversation. They're much more likely to reply. Something that you mentioned there, I think, Annie, is just around like, is it a bit informal? And yeah, it is. It's definitely a bit more casual. And that can actually be okay because you can get a conversation going that can turn into a more professional conversation. And, I think it's a balance. Often what you need to do is switch that conversation to email at some point. And that's kind of what you're referring to there as well, is that yes, there's a point when it's kind of like they're showing actually they're interested in working with you and exploring. And they're like, oh, hey, I see that you do this, by the way. Can you send me some more information? That is the time to switch to email. What it does is it basically signals we're going from an informal conversation via Instagram DMs to a more formal conversation via email. So this is where actually jumping into that side can work. Now, this is where you can literally say to them, hey, great, what's your email address? Would love to send you some information via email. That's the best way to do it, by the way. Some people say, oh, yep, we can chat more. Here's my email. Send me an email and I'll get those details for you. Now you've put the ball in their court and they're going to get busy and distracted and not check their DMs. Get their email address so that you can email them. Right? Really, really important. And then even when you email them, you can send them a direct message saying, hey, I've just sent you an email. right? To really acknowledge that it's now over there. And you can continue the conversation via email from there. And that's a more professional place to do that. Look, one of the things I love about business is there's exceptions to every single rule, right? You can actually just continue the conversation through Instagram. You can sell via Instagram. You can do a full thing via Instagram. It's just not generally the best way to do it. But there can be exceptions. You can have people who have literally sold stuff through Instagram. Once again, it depends what they're actually selling, but that's just something to be aware of, is that, yes, here's the rule of thumb is to switch to email, but there's always exceptions to these things as well. Love it. Very, very good. Let's keep moving through the questions here. So I know Jojo. Hey, Jojo, hope you're doing well. I know you had a couple of questions there. So we're going to dive into your first one there, which is really around, is it worth, or do you send emails out of state there as well? And I know there's been a few chats in there as well. The answer is yes, absolutely, you can do that. Yes, you've got to think about the costs if you need to travel. So we're talking about murals specifically. And I know there's some really good tips there from Sydney around that mentioned there too. But yeah, you can actually include it in your costs. So there's two ways to do it. You could say, great, here's what it's going to cost. You could just not even mention the fact that you're out of state, unless it's going to get in the way of you delivering. As long as you're willing to go there and they're willing to pay whatever you're quoting, well, they might be happy with that. You may decide you're going to quote it separately. So you say, hey, great, it's going to cost you $3,000 for the mural. It's going to cost another $500 because I've got to travel to you. Right. So that's definitely one thing to be aware of, is you can do it in different ways. And this can be a really great way to expand your horizons. Just be aware, there's probably a lot of opportunities in your local region. Sometimes we're like, oh, there's no opportunities around me. I'm going to look elsewhere because I've heard there's other opportunities elsewhere. It's like, no, there's probably more people in your region, state, area, country than you think that actually do want what you do. You've just got to actually make sure you're getting to them. So yes, connecting with local businesses. It brings kind of a side point I wanted to talk about within this as well, is that you can go in person to places. And like, I think people forget about this stuff. You can do in-person outreach, and it's like cold outreach. It's like you can go to people's businesses, you could go to people's restaurants, you can go knock on doors. And that can be a really good way to break through the noise, because a lot of people don't do that. So yeah, you can email if you want to do a mural, for example, at a cafe or a restaurant, you want to do their logo, whatever you want to do for them, you can physically go there. I'm like, people like, what? You can go there? It's like, yes, we forget some of these simple things that you can do. We get complex with these really complex email marketing chains and emails, and yeah, you can do that as well. But sometimes to break through the noise, you just need to go straight and talk to people. And honestly, sometimes that can work phenomenally well because you've shown up. Now, obviously, Jojo, if we're talking about out of state, well, that's a bit of a mission to go fly somewhere, drive somewhere. But we've literally had clients that have gone on holiday somewhere, and they're like, while they're there, they're going to pop into a few places that might potentially work with them, and they would come back later and do the project. So once again, it can be a good way, but not necessarily always worth it to do a trip just to another place to do that. But maybe more in your local region, it can be good. It's also terrifying, right? One of the things, very terrifying to go and talk to people in person. I think even with COVID, a lot changed. We're all used to, being online and hiding behind our screens and our laptops and these things. It's like, no, you can actually physically go see people as well. So it's such an important part of that, is there's lots of ways to market a business, not just digitally, not just online as well. So, so powerful when we think about these things. Cool. We're going to jump into a few other questions here. So just checking my notes and checking the chat. We're going to jump into one of these recent ones here, which is, yeah, I love this, Anna. So how do you start the conversation when you just physically shop? We're actually going to talk about that one because it's related to what we just talked about. So yeah, it's like, you imagine, I think we all think about our worst fear. We walk in there and we go, hi. And they're like, hi, who are you? And you're like, I'm a designer. Like, you just imagine like the worst case. This is where actually preparing and having a plan and even writing out a script before you go in can just help you. Now, I'm not saying you're going to hold up a booklet there and be like, hi, my name is Logan, going through those things there, but actually having a bit of a planned script. One of the first things that you want to do is just introduce yourself. Super simple introduction, and then ask who is the best person to talk to about this thing that you can help with, right? That's often what happens, is the first person you talk to in a lot of businesses in person or restaurants, cafes, it's probably not going to be the person that you need to talk to, but they might be able to refer you to. So they might say, oh, great, yeah, absolutely. You can talk to this person. They're going to be back at 2 p.m. Amazing, great. Or, hey, here's this person here. You can actually email them. You can even say, even though you've now switched to email, you can email that person and say, hey, I just popped in today. Your team member might have mentioned, here's an introduction. You can take the conversation from there. And that can be a really powerful way because it showed you've made a personalized effort and actually gone in. You don't need to sell when you go in. This is just about building a connection, maybe having a chat, learning about what they need, and continuing the conversation via email, saying, great, want to share a bit more about myself, just connect, briefly say hi. Also, what you can do is drop something off, right? So when I say drop something off, it could be as simple as a business card, but it could be something more in depth. It could be some information about what you offer and how you do that. You can actually go and get things printed out, being aware that that can get costly, but it's definitely something you can do as well. Love it. Do you have anything else you wanted to mention around those in-person things there, Sydney, and even talking to people in person around that?
Yeah, definitely. I've done that. I like when I first started my business, I was in my hometown and I just went around to like every restaurant in the square and just dropped off my card, was just kind of with the manager of the night. Just real quick intro. I live in town. Here's what I do. I'd love to chat with you if you're interested. Keep it quick.
Love it. It's so important to actually test out and try these things. And the thing I will say is, anyone that's never done this before, the first time you do it probably will be awkward and it probably won't go that well, and that's okay, but you're going to learn from that. Don't worry, they're not going to be out
town over.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, okay, well, that didn't work out. Maybe I won't. But it's look, people are not going to be just, the whole neighborhood's not going to be like, did you know this person came in and they're such an idiot and they said these things, they don't even know what they're talking about. Part of this here is getting in there and trying it. And also everyone's going to have different approaches within this as well. Hey, we're going to jump into this one from Amanda here around quoting for a project where they felt the price was too high. Just before we do that, we are coming towards the end of this webinar as well. So I do just want to drop that link in again. If anyone did want to do the survey, we would love you to check that out. I'd love to get on some calls with some of you as well, with myself or Paul from the team. So we're going to be giving away 3 30-minute coaching calls, as well as some extras with Paul there as well. So do that form if that's interesting for you. So we're going to talk about this one around price. So as I said, Amanda shared, if you quote a project and they felt the price was too high, do you try to negotiate and come down on price or move on? And Sydney's already shared some good things on the chat, and I just wanted to add to that. And first thing, yeah, it's okay that some people are going to say no. A good rule of thumb is that 20% of people should think that you are charging too much. They should decline you because of price. Now, it hurts when you hear someone who's like, oh, you're so expensive. You want to just lower all of your prices. You're like, no, I'm way too expensive. No, actually hearing that is a good thing because it shows there's some friction. If everyone is saying, yes, amazing, I want to work with you, great, it means that you're pricing too low, right? That's a kind of a simple thing there. Now, everything is negotiable, Amanda, and this is where, yes, you can absolutely negotiate with them. I would see what's possible. Now, that may not just involve, hey, okay, that's all good, I can just take $500 off the price. Look, this is your business. You can choose to do that. And sometimes early on, you may decide to do that. Not generally what we recommend to just discount yourself. Instead, what you could do is lean into understanding their needs a bit more and maybe offering some alternatives. You might find that, yes, you've just offered this thing that's $2,000, but actually, and they're saying, oh, I've only got $1,000, you might be able to do something for $1,000. It just may not be the same thing that you originally offered, but it may still satisfy their needs. So that's where sometimes it's exploring and even asking them, oh, I hear it too high. Like, what sort of budget were you thinking about? And that does 2 things. One of them is it says, well, is this person way off? Are they going to, once again, you're offering something for $2,000 and they're thinking, oh, I was thinking $300. And it's like, well, this is way off. This is never going to work. Or they might be like, oh, I was more thinking $1,800. And you're like, oh, we're so close. I think we can make this work. We can figure it out. Is it that you negotiate and come back and say, hey, look, I can do this. I can't do that. I can take this piece off here. I can change this part here. So really, when you're decreasing price, ideally you take something away. So you might be like, well, I don't need as many rounds of edits, or we could do it this way here, or we could make it a slightly smaller project. Would that work for you? Some people, by the way, will always try and negotiate on price with you. no matter what. So they might come back and say to you, hey, it's too expensive. You can go to them, totally all good, totally understand. You know, if anything changes, let me know. They may come back to you and go, okay, great, let's just do it anyway. Because some people just always want to negotiate and want a deal, right? So just be aware, just because they've said no or they've said it's too high doesn't mean that they're not going to end up working with you anyway at the price that you originally quoted. So just really wanted to share that one because it's pretty interesting, the stuff that can go on in our heads around this as well, in terms of what you think they are thinking and what they're actually thinking. They might be like, oh, well, let's just see if we can, I'm willing to pay that, let's see if we can lower the rate a little bit. And you've just cut off the conversation and gone, oh, you've not replied or gone, oh, all the best, see you later, you'll never get something cheaper than this, right? And they're like, this person's a bit of a dick, I'm not going to work with them at all, right? So just being very, very aware of these things as well. Hey, we are coming towards the end of our webinar. I know we've had some good stuff happening in the chat as well, and I just love seeing a very, very active chat. So thank you so much for everyone for engaging. Would love to connect with many of you via the DMs and obviously via the survey and all those good things there. That offer is open to people who have watched the recording as well. So if you watch the recording of this and you would love to do the survey, fantastic. We would love to definitely connect with you there as well. Fantastic. We're going to wrap things up there. Sydney, thank you so much for having me along as well. Honestly, it was just such a delight to connect with everyone here. It's been a great webinar, huh? Amazing.
Oh, yeah. I'm glad that we got to share all this info. And yeah, thanks for coming, guys.
Awesome. Hey, take care, everyone. Have an amazing morning, afternoon, evening. We'll wrap things up there. Have a lovely day. Take care, everyone.